But today we're talking about Mankind.
Yeah.
The Observer wrote this: Cactus Jack, who had just moved from New York to Atlanta, was thought due to his look and style to be a wrestler the WWF would never be interested in, but times have changed. He's said to be very close to going, with some saying it could be shortly after the Royal Rumble. Heyman supposedly told WWF officials, which have been attempting to make friends rather than enemies, that he didn't want to lose Jack until he could finish this current program, and said that would be April of 1996, and the WWF said they were in no hurry to bring him in. The WWF is also looking at ECW as a place where they can send their own wrestlers to get work next year, since they aren't going to be running as many house shows, and guys are already complaining about not getting enough dates. Jack is longtime friends with Troy Martin, the WWF's Dean Douglas, who is well known to be unhappy in his situation in Titan, which may prove to be a factor as well. Which does make me want to ask, did you talk to Shane about that? Because, boy, he did not have the best experience.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, Shane was Shane wasn't high on the idea of going there. And as crazy as it sounds now, looking at The Undertaker, it was thought by some of the key people in the business that he'd already had his run. That 96. So he came in Survivor Series in 90.
Yep.
6 years. Some people thought it's a great gimmick. It's run its course. Undertaker was looking to make some changes in his style. I think if you look at The Undertaker's incredible winning streak at Mania, not all those matches were five-star classics.
No, sir.
There was a long series. You know, it was just they would put him in a program with someone who was bigger than him in some way. So whether it was Giant Gonzalez being taller than him, it was Kamala being heavy, Bundy. Yeah, so you weren't getting, and then, Snook, when he wrestled Snooka was a little past his prime at that point. And I think, not that Snooka was bigger than Undertaker, but they had gravitated towards that by those final years.
He didn't have the best opponents.
Yeah, and I've never even had it verified. I've never even asked Mark if he was the guy who said, I want to work with this guy. Because I went from being, a character that Vince was bringing in for the sole purpose of breaking Jim Ross's heart to somebody who started out on, like near the top of the card by coming out. I did have a match with Bob Holly. My opening match was with Bob Holly, but on that same episode of Raw, I came out of the crowd or came down the aisle, and I jumped The Undertaker, and we were off to the races.
I found it a little odd, especially in hindsight, that Dave mentioned that you moved from New York to Atlanta. I mean, I guess at the time, there's the spiritual home of the WWF, which is New York, not Connecticut.
Right.
And, of course, Atlanta's the backyard. But that doesn't seem...
Well, there's a reason. The reason behind it is we owned a home in Atlanta.
Right.
When I was working steadily in Japan, my wife had worked herself into phenomenal shape after having 2 children. And she wanted to give the modeling a try. And that's a New York thing. So we rented our house for 6 months, and for the 6 months I was on Long Island. It made traveling a lot easier because we flew Northwest. I'm sure Delta had a nonstop, but that's not what I was flying. So I was flying Northwest, and then Northwest had nonstop flights to Tokyo from New York. And also my parents were there.
Yeah.
It was great to see my parents. But when we went back to Atlanta, it was because I had landed the WWE job. We had decided that my wife she'd gotten some work, but not enough to explain away giving up, what was a really nice little home. Right?
Yeah.
A little nice little home there in a suburb of Atlanta. That's why we went back.
Gotcha. So, what do you think of the report that Paul Heyman says, I'm not done with him yet. I need him to April. I mean, that feels a little different than the way it was originally explained of, oh, no, you're better than this. Oh, but not yet.
But both things could have happened.
Yeah.
Both things could have happened. I was I would argue that I believe it was always the plan to come out the day after Mania. They weren't in a rush. And another thing is I had said to Vince that I wanted to finish my commitments in Japan He said, have you signed a contract? I said, no. And he looked at me and said, so you want to do dates based on a handshake and not a contract? I said, yes, if I could. He said, that's the type of man I want working for me.
Yeah.
Because at that point, he'd had a lot of departures, guys that he probably thought would never leave. And so I think he liked the idea of someone who was sticking to his word based on a handshake. So I continued to do the Japanese tours. I continued to do ECW, but now I took the steam off of WCW as part of my anti-hardcore gimmick. Because I went from the Forgive Me, Uncle Eric airbrushed shirt, which was a classic, the Dungeon of Doom, because that was like the antithesis of what ECW fans wanted. And then when of course, the ECW fans would know before anyone, the word got out I was heading to WWF. And I don't think I was forbidden from mentioning it because we did incorporate it into the character. And so instead of Forgive Me, Uncle Eric, I had the WWF and F T-shirt, and I started talking about WWF. So it was known that I was going there.
Yeah.